Hello and welcome back to The Note. Let's take a look at China today. Judging by the surface data coming out of China, we have reason to be worried, but obviously many of us are unclear as to exactly how much we can trust that data. So with me now I have a very prominent expert on the subject. He's our newly appointed Emerging Markets editor, James King. James, thanks for talking to me once more. Let's start by taking a look at the HSBC China Manufacturing Flash PMI, which came out and administered quite a shock to markets, suggesting that we are into contraction mode. We're below 50. How seriously should we take this number, do you think?
I think it is very revealing. I mean, we have to remember it is a flash PMI. It's not the final PMI, but I do believe it's revealing. I think the Chinese economy is beginning to slow down. The key metric is the fixed asset investment number, which in the last quarter of last year did begin to slow quite appreciably. That number, fixed asset investment, is the key driver of the Chinese economy. When it slows, it generally brings the economy with it. So this I would characterize as a gentle slowdown that we're beginning to see in the first quarter of this year.
Well, and a gentle slowdown is more or less what the leadership wants to engineer at this point, right? Rather, it's consistent with a soft rather than a hard landing.
That's right. There tends to be a lot of divergent views on the rate at which the Chinese economy will grow this year. Most Chinese economists are predicting around 7.5, 7.4. There are bears who are seeing a different scenario in which certain things get out of control, particularly financial management and particularly the shadow financial system. And that could, if it happens, lead to a lower GDP growth rate this year.
Okay, and on the subject of the shadow financial system, let's take a look at SHIBOR, the main or the most public measure of Chinese short-term interest rates. That's been administering a number of short, sharp shocks of late, and the shocks seem to be coming rather more closely together. What should we be reading from this?
Well, if we look at this chart, one feature is very noticeable: the sharp spikes in the SHIBOR rate. Here we have one, another, and another lately, and one most recently there. These really are warnings by the authorities, particularly the central bank, to the banks, state-owned banks and commercial banks in China, not to lend too much to shadow financial institutions. They're basically squeezing the interbank money supply in order to warn those banks to obey their directives not to lend too much to the shadow system. Now, it may seem a slightly blunt instrument, but that is actually what is going on.
It looks rather an uncomfortably jagged instrument to me. Isn't it? The rough equivalent of controlling traffic by putting a bunch of nails across the road every so often.
I would say that's probably what's happening. However, I don't think we should draw a conclusion from here that the central bank is out of control or that this is necessarily going to spiral out of control. When we look at what's happening in the shadow financial system, we actually see quite a lot of concern by the authorities, and in one case recently where a trust loan looked like it was going to be defaulted on by a coal mine in Shanxi province, we saw the local government working very hard to make sure that the default will not take place.
Now, that sounds very reminiscent of the US credit crisis 6 or 7 years ago. Don't even allow one default to happen, because then that will encourager les autres, will show that it could happen. Is there something similar happening here then?
Yes, I think there is. Even by the government's estimate, the total size of the shadow financial system is around 1/3 of total financing. Now, if you allow a trust loan to default, that could, and I think most people think it would, have a knock-on effect, triggering several other defaults of trust loans. Because effectively, people have to invest in these trust loans. If they're defaulting for the first time, this would be a first default, then they will not be that keen to invest, and that will certainly have a knock-on effect. That's the type of scenario that the bears are looking at for saying the Chinese economy will not grow at 7.4, 7.5% this year. However, in still the mainstream view is that probably the central bank is in control. It will manage to massage this process of slimming down the shadow financial system without creating a wave of defaults.
Okay, James, thank you very much. Let's hope that viewpoint is correct. plainly, it does seem fair to say that the soft landing is still on course at the moment, but as James has just described, there are still plenty of risks to that scenario.